Hi, my name is Vera V, and welcome to my podcast, Stories by Vera V. Today, I have a very special guest by the name of
Iain.
And we'll be discussing what's it like spending 6 years on a boat. Interesting stories by interesting people. Stories by Vera V. So to start off, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Iain. I grew up in the Caribbean on an island called St. Lucia. And I guess I was instantly attracted to the water, being on an island. I learned to sail in my teens on small boats, but I didn't really get too serious about it. And then I moved to Canada when I was at a young age and was instantly landlocked, so I had no access to the water. Yeah, go ahead.
So to start off, before we get into your sailing experience, could you talk more about growing up in the Caribbean? Because I feel like it would be very different than just growing up in the US.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was normal, obviously. I mean, we spent Christmas on the beach. We didn't do the classic Christmas lunch that everyone does here. It was just...
Was there no Christmas tree?
Beach. Yeah, we had a Christmas tree, but it was everything was pretty islandy, I guess. You know, like all the kids walked around barefoot, and we lived about a 5-minute walk from the beach, so we always had access to that.
Did you swim a lot in it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I learned to swim when I was maybe 3 or 4.
Really? That's really young. Who taught you?
Yeah. We had an instructor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What was school like?
Well, I mean, I don't really know how to compare it to what it was like here. Mm-hmm. But I mean, we all had uniforms from a young age. Pretty much every school in the Caribbean, St. Lucia, has uniforms. We had a bell to signal when it was lunchtime. The teacher would ring the bell for everyone to come in.
Wait, like a physical bell?
Yeah, an actual bell. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess pretty old school.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, there are no computers. Everything is handwritten. We had a jungle gym in the yard, and we played cricket during lunch breaks and football as well.
Did you guys ever did you have a swim class or anything related to the ocean?
No, we didn't have anything related to the sea. So it's so strangely in the Caribbean, it's actually very common for people to not know how to swim.
Really?
Which is really surprising. Yeah. Not most, but a good portion of the local population in the Caribbean can't actually swim.
Do you know how many people, or just like a general percentage?
I wouldn't know an accurate number. My guess would be maybe 20%.
Okay, that's quite a lot considering.
Yeah, considering it's an island.
But also, you said that you moved to Canada right after, right?
Yes, I moved to Canada at a pretty young age. My parents got divorced, and my mum decided that Canada would be far enough away from the Caribbean.
Has she ever told you why she chose Canada specifically, or is it just kind of random?
Just the education was a lot better than the Caribbean, and we had family in Canada as well. So yeah, I got into snowboarding in Canada because that was about the only sport that I could think of.
Did you miss the ocean while you were there?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So when you were in the Caribbean, you also mentioned that that's how you kind of fell in love with water and whatnot. Do you have a specific moment in mind where you just realized that?
So when we were maybe like 7 or 8, this is going to sound really weird, but my best friend and I, we knew each other since we were 2. Mm-hmm. And every now and again you'd get storms that would pass by. Obviously not hurricanes, but when you get these little storms, we would go to the beach and the waves would be huge. And we just loved body surfing the waves and getting hit by the waves. Yeah, thinking back, I don't know why we were allowed to do that, but
a little dangerous.
yeah, but it was fun.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I think if I could pinpoint a moment, it would probably be that moment.
What's the biggest storm that you've experienced while there?
So I think when I was 10, we were living in the Cayman Islands. It was an island called Grand Cayman. And there was a Category 5 hurricane called Hurricane Ivan.
Oh.
And we were renting a house near the ocean, and we decided that it was going to be potentially safer to stay in a hotel.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know how bad it was going to be, but we knew it was a Category 5. So we stayed in the bottom floor of this hotel. We thought that potentially it would either get flooded or the roof could potentially fly off. So we decided that we would stick to the flooding situation rather than losing the roof.
Mm-hmm.
And so we chose downstairs, and sure enough, it got flooded. There was about 5 feet of water, so we couldn't stay downstairs anymore. So everyone in the hotel moved to the top floor. We had our dog with us. He was a big German Shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess we had some sort of protection, I guess you could call it, because there was just like so many people hiding in this hotel.
How old were you during that time?
I was about 10,
mm-hmm.
10 years old, yeah. And I mean, I remember there was a gas leak going on in the hotel, and there were people smoking in the same area. Yeah, it wasn't good. We were just in the hallway, huddled together, hoping that the roof would stay.
How long did that last? Do you remember?
I don't remember exactly, but maybe like 16 to 24 hours.
Okay, that's a long time.
Yeah, it was a long time. The entire island was underwater. I think there was a Google image picture, and you couldn't see the island.
Just because of the water?
Just buildings. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, there were people driving boats on the roads and jet skis around town.
Wow.
Yeah.
Much different from Canada, huh?
Yeah, and then when we got back to our house after the hotel, there was a coconut tree that fell, must have been half a foot from the doorstep. There was a huge hole in the roof. It just blew out. And the opposite side of the street, our neighbors stayed, and he told us that there were 3 tornadoes in our neighborhood. And luckily our side of the street was fine, but the other side of the street was just devastated. Wow.
How long did it take you to reconstruct for the house and all?
We moved house.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it wasn't going to be a quick process.
Mm-hmm. So you moved out of the Caribbean when you were how old? Like, I don't know.
So we moved shortly after that hurricane. I was 11, and I think when I got to Canada, I pretty much celebrated my 12th birthday as soon as I arrived, I think. So yeah, 11.
Okay. And while you were in Canada, have you had thoughts of sailing the world, or when did that come?
No, I didn't know that was going to be my life at all.
Mm-hmm.
So in Canada, I did junior high and high school, and didn't know what I wanted to do in university. I graduated when I was 17, and all my friends were going to university, so I was like, I'll go to university. I knew I was really good at math. That was about the only subject I could get 100% in. And so I started to do an accounting degree, and realized about a year and a half after that I did not want to be an accountant. What made you want to be an accountant in the first place? Just because of the math solely factor? Because I was good at math. And my grandfather was an accountant.
Uh-huh. Why not engineering, though? Because engineering also has to do with math, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So
okay. So kind of like random.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I dropped out after a year and a half. and then moved to England to get my yachtmaster license.
Mm-hmm.
And then shortly after that, I got a job in St. Lucia, skippering a 46-foot sailboat, doing charters.
Uh-huh. What made you want to get the license in the first place? Do you remember a specific moment or maybe a time period where you're like, yeah, maybe this is something I want to do?
Actually, my mom suggested it. So she knew that I had sailed a little bit when I was a kid in the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. And she said, well, I mean, people make a living out of working on boats. I didn't know it was a thing. Mm-hmm. So I was like, yeah, I mean, I guess I'll go to England, try this license, see if I like it. Because I had never sailed bigger boats. I'd only sailed small boats before.
How old were you when you first sailed?
Oh, I'm not sure. My parents took a sailboat to the Grenadines when I was like 4 or 5. They tied me to the mast so I wouldn't fall off.
Really?
Yeah.
That's funny. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so my mum suggested I get my skipper's license in England and tried it out. Liked it. It was a super immersive course. So for like 3 or 4 months, we basically just lived on a 40-foot sailboat with 3 or 4 other people that were getting their license as well.
Mm-hmm. And for the people that were getting their licenses, were there any that didn't know how to sail at all, or have all had some previous experience?
Yeah, most of them had previous experience, but there were actually a couple people that were retired and just wanted to try it for fun because they wanted to buy a boat. Uh-huh. They wanted to see if they could do it themselves. So yeah, there was one guy who was in his 60s who was retired. He was just doing it for fun. He actually didn't end up passing the course, which was sad.
Oh.
Yeah, and then there was another guy who was a plane engineer. I think he worked for Boeing, who was retired in his 40s and wanted to try sailing.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So you were saying about the course, how you lived on a 40-foot sailboat? Yeah,
roughly that size. It was based in England, so we did a lot of sailing around the UK. And then between France as well, because we had to. It wasn't only learning how to be the skipper or captain of the boat. It was we had to build miles in order to take the exam. I think you had to have 2,500 miles in charge of a vessel or be second in command in order to be eligible for the exam.
How did you track those? Because it's a lot of people on a boat. So did you guys, like, as soon as you switched, you just started tracking it again?
There's an instrument on the boat that tracks the distance you travel.
Okay.
Yeah.
How often did you switch?
I think we would do 2 days as captain and switch.
And what was the schedule like? How long were you the captain? How long did you get to rest for during that time?
Well, that was divided up into shore-based courses as well as sailing courses. So I think we were on the boat for a week at a time or 2 weeks at a time. And then we'd be on land doing charting work and how to navigate in class. But on the boat, that particular schedule was, I think it was 2 hours on, 4 hours off. So you'd be on deck for 2 hours and then sleeping for 4 hours.
How'd you sleep? Because it wasn't, I assume, not like on the floor or anything. Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, it was a pretty small sailboat. So I was always the youngest, so I'd just take the worst bed.
Take you one for the team.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you have a hard time adjusting? Because I imagine when you sleep, it's kind of loud.
Yeah, for the first while, you don't really sleep. But so during the course, we didn't really do too many long distance trips. It was mostly, I think the biggest we did was a day and a half. Because, when you're learning, you don't really want to do a week-long trip on the water.
Yeah. And while you were sailing, what did you use to navigate with? Like, were you allowed to use the systems, I guess, already in place, or did you have to do it
Yeah,
by
so
the stars?
the boats we were learning on were pretty old school.
Uh-huh.
It was mostly charts, paper charts, and you take a position every hour based on your speed and heading,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have a GPS on board as a safety measure, I guess, to make sure you're doing the right thing, because you want to cross reference between where you think you are and where the GPS tells you you are.
Mm-hmm. Were you always close between the two? Okay, that's good. What about star navigation? Because I've heard a lot about that.
Yeah, so astronavigation is actually a different course. It's so what I was doing on that particular course was Yachtmaster Offshore, and astronavigation is Yachtmaster Ocean, which I did the in class for at a different date.
Okay.
Which is, it's basically just math. Like, you're given formulas, and you have a sextant that you use to measure the angle of the sun and the angle of the moon. And you have a formula, and you use those inputs to guesstimate where you are. So you take the measurement of the sun at midday, so when it's right above you, and the measurement of the sun at sunrise and sunset, and then you use that to have a rough triangulation of where you are.
That sounds complex.
Yeah, I never used it.
So you don't know how to do it like that?
It's, I mean, I could do it, but it's never used, because when I started working on bigger boats, we had really sophisticated systems. And it was just never relevant to use astral navigation.
Yeah, I think it's just more of an old school thing, like you mentioned.
Yeah, so I mean, every yacht has backups for the most part. So if one system fails, you have another way of tracking where you are.
So how many systems are there for every yacht?
Oh God. So on my most recent boat that I worked on, we had two charting systems. One had two computers linked to it. The other one had one computer linked to it. Then we had a tablet with a separate charting system. And then we had another GPS system. I think in total we had 3 GPS systems and 3 charting systems. Yeah.
And for the charting systems, how do they work? They just track where the boat goes?
Yeah, so you connect it to the GPS of the boat.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, just like your phone, if you open up maps, that's how it works.
And also for boats, is there such thing as a black box like there is in the plane?
No.
So if
maybe on commercial vessels, but on the super yachts I worked on. No.
So after you got your license, you started working. When did you get your first job? Like, what was the time interval between the two?
Well, I went to Florida and started day working on a big 150 meter powerboat. Decided I did not want to do that because I basically just cleaned all day. So I left that job and flew back to the Caribbean. And I think the day after I arrived, I met this guy in a bar who was my dad's friend. And he mentioned that he just bought a new 46-foot catamaran that he was looking for a skipper. I'm like, well, I just got my skipper's license. He's like, oh, come buy the boat tomorrow. And then he hired me on the spot.
So for the skipper, just to clarify, what does that job entail specifically?
So what I refer to as a skipper is basically the captain of a small boat. So you're in charge of every safety aspect of that boat. And I had one, like, I guess you could call it deckhand or stewardess below me that I would get to give me a hand. But yeah, you're basically in charge of everything on that boat. Okay.
Do you feel like that's a tough position to fill?
Yeah, I mean, I was 19 at the time, so yeah. I had the deckhand underneath me was 46.
Really?
So it was a position where you have to mature pretty quickly, and you can't take too much shit, otherwise you just get walked over.
So with that boat from your dad's friend, how long did you work with that?
Just over a year, maybe a year and 2 months.
Did you
and I
like
decided it was fun for a while. We had it was, I guess, sort of high end day charters and a couple overnight trips around the Caribbean. But I mean, it got boring after a while, pretty repetitive. So I got offered a job to help sail a boat from Thailand to Madagascar. And I was like, I can't say no to that opportunity. So I told my boss I got offered this job, and he said, yeah, well, I figured you were going to be leaving soon anyway. So yeah, it was easy. He was a nice guy.
Did you have to give 2 weeks notice?
Yeah. I think I gave him a month.
Okay. That's a good time.
Yeah.
Okay. And then for your new job, they were just telling about?
Yeah. So they flew me from St. Lucia to Thailand, and immediately put me to work. It was a Swan 90. It's a 90-foot sailboat. And Swans are like, I guess you'd call it like the Bentley of cars. Similar to that. So it's a really high-end sailboat. Most 90-foot sailboats will run you like $1.5 million to $2 million. This was $9 million.
That's very pricey.
So it's a pretty expensive sailboat, but really nice.
Is it also the biggest boat you've worked on thus far?
No, the biggest boat I've worked on was 130 feet. 130 feet.
Oh wow! How much was that worth?
That was actually cheaper.
Really?
I think it was purchased for $8 million, and right after I left, it was sold for less than that. I don't know the exact number.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I joined that 90-foot sailboat as the deckhand, which is the lowest rank on a sailboat or on a boat. And I was basically just learning how it is to be on super yachts, because it's run very differently from what I was used to. Yeah, so everything needs to be spotless, polished. If you can't see a reflection in it, it's not clean enough. Really? Sort of thing. So, but yeah, it was really good. I think we had 1 month to get familiar with the boat, and that was when I started learning about higher tech navigation systems and using more radars and systems like that we didn't have in the Caribbean.
Was that much different?
I worked on. Yeah, it took a while to learn, for sure. And most of the stuff you don't really learn until you're in like sailing the boat, where you actually use it to measure distances and navigate, stuff like that.
So as the deckhand, what were your hours like for work every day?
This particular, so each boat is different. It just depends on the captain for the most part. This was actually the worst hours I ever had.
Really?
In any job I've worked. Yeah. It was so sunrise to 5 o'clock. And I think sunrise was like 7 a.m. over there. I don't really remember. And that was 6 days a week. Monday to Saturday.
Did you get overtime for that?
Shit, no. No. You work until the captain says you've done enough.
So on the boat, was the environment with the staff, was it kind of like everybody just really respected the captain, or did they more fear them?
So I've had multiple different captains, and I would say half of them try a combination of being feared but liked at the same time, which in my opinion didn't work, because most of the time you ended up just being pissed off at the captain. But this captain, well, yeah, he tried a combination of the two, and it was a weird situation, because the first mate on the boat was ready to be captain, but the captain didn't want to step down as the captain because he liked his role as captain. And they were both Italian, so they butted heads a lot. No offense to any Italians listeners.
How old were they? Were they the same age?
The first mate was about 35. The captain was 52, maybe. Yeah.
And for the captains, what's the average age to step down or to retire?
I mean, it really just depends. A lot of captains, if they're offered a managerial role to work from shore, they'll step down as captain. The oldest captain I've worked for was 62.
Okay.
And I think the oldest captain I've seen is about 75.
That's old.
Yeah, that's basically when you don't know what else to do with your life, so you just carry on being a captain.
Kind of depressing.
Yeah.
So back to that Italian captain, you said that he tried a combination of being feared but also being liked. What did that look like?
Well, he would do things like, all right, you guys can take 2 hours off early today. And you're like, oh, great. Working 6 days a week and I can take 2 hours off early. Thank you so much. And then he would get annoyed if you didn't say, oh, thank you.
Really?
Yeah, it was weird. And he would like occasionally have to or thinks he has to raise his voice and like grab your attention to, I don't know. Yeah. I had issues with that captain, but I learned a lot from him.
So it was
looking back, it was a really good learning experience I had.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
So then what happened after that boat?
So that boat, we sailed to Madagascar from that boat, which was a 18-day trip across the Indian Ocean. And that's 18 days of not seeing any land. And it was just 4 of us. So we were sailing for 2 hours and sleeping for 2 hours. So it was a 2-hour on, 2-hour off shift for 18 days, which is horrible. Because you have to wake up slightly before your shift starts. And then when you go to sleep, it takes you half an hour, 45 minutes to fall asleep. Because the boat is just constantly leaning over the whole time.
Do you think you got any deep sleep in that?
Yeah, probably. For the first day, absolutely not. But I know there were times where I was just so tired, and I would just like conk out as soon as I hit the bed.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a few rough storms on that boat as well, where everyone needed to be on deck. So,
what was the biggest one out of those?
We had waves maybe 10 to 15 feet high, completely submerging the boat. Like we'd sail over one wave and crash into another one, and the wave would just completely consume the boat.
Was that scary?
Yeah, we were clipped on, so we didn't fall off. At one time I got hit off the wheel and I got thrown into the lifelines.
Oh my gosh.
So if I wasn't clipped on, I probably would have gone overboard. But yeah, it was scary. But you have a job to do. It's to keep the boat safe, to get it to an island in Madagascar so the billionaire can use it for a couple of weeks.
What a fun job.
Yeah.
So for the storms, how long did they last for?
It varied. Sometimes you'd get what we call squalls, which last for half an hour, but you could see it. You could see them on the horizon coming in. It was just like heavy rain and a lot of wind for a short amount of time.
So the best way, go ahead.
You'd get others that would be over a day, 2 days. Yeah. Sometimes you're sailing with a storm. So you're going the same direction as the storm, which takes even longer for the storm to pass.
But during storms and times like these, what's the safest way to stay safe? Is it just to be clipped on, like you said?
Yeah, so we all had life jackets that had AIS positioning systems on them. So they were triggered where if they got submerged by water, it would automatically inflate and activate this beacon, which was positioned on all the charts on the boat. Mm-hmm. So you could see exactly where that person was if they fell overboard.
Okay. And then if that happened, who would come and get you? Because let's say you all fell overboard.
You die.
Yeah, but in a hypothetical situation that you don't, who would be able to come in and rescue you? Because who has your location?
So the location, so like departing a port, you have a person on land who knows that you're leaving. So we had a home office, I guess you would call it. Mm-hmm. Okay. And we'd tell them that we're taking this route across the Indian Ocean, expected to be there in 17 to 18 days. And there are ways to send emails in the middle of the ocean, depending on what boat you work on.
There are?
Yeah.
Like what?
I forget what the actual system is called, but it's the antenna is called a VSAT, which basically gives you small amounts of internet in the middle of the ocean. But you can't send pictures. You can send like a text message or an email with not a lot of information in it.
Did you guys send anything during your 18-day trip?
Yeah, I would update my family.
Okay.
Where I was. And you can track the vessel online. There's a website called Vessel Finder or something like that. And you can just punch in the name of the vessel and the type of vessel. And it will show you a live location of where the boat is.
That's good.
Yeah.
And for that boat, while you were traveling, how many people were on it?
4 crew.
Okay. Including yourself?
Including myself. We were supposed to have 5, but the stewardess that was hired, apparently she gets violently seasick. Don't know why she was working on a boat, but they flew her to Madagascar instead of sailing with us.
And so when you arrived to Madagascar, was that your first time being there?
Yeah, it was my first time sailing across the ocean. First time in Asia. First time in Madagascar. It was overall a good trip. Madagascar was interesting. We were based on an island called Nosy Bay, and it was definitely a culture shock for me. There's obviously a lot of poverty over there, and a lot of people live in huts and on the beach. I mean, there are islands that it's like, I don't want to say tribal people, but it's something similar to that. Okay. Technology doesn't exist on some of the islands over there. So it was really interesting to see that part of the world that I hadn't seen before. And, you arrive in a flashy sailboat and you get hundreds of people in their canoe swimming up to you asking for anything. When we arrived, we didn't know what the crime was like. So we had to do anchor watches where one person would have to be awake all the time. I think we did that for the first 4 or 5 days. So there's one person on deck awake all the time. And if anything were to happen, you just wake everyone up.
And how long did the person have to watch for? 24 hours?
No, we did 2-hour shifts. So because there's 4 of us, you could be awake for 2 hours, then sleep for 6 hours. Okay. Yeah.
And then what happened after Madagascar?
Well, we spent 3 months in Madagascar. We were finding diving destinations and kite surfing destinations for the owner so that he could have a nice trip flying down on his private jet.
Was that part of your job? Like in the job description?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, not in the job description.
Yeah.
But it was expected.
Okay.
So it was fun. We got to see all these epic snorkeling spots, and there were sharks in the water. We saw a, what do you call it? Whale shark.
Really?
In Madagascar. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it was really cool. I got to see sea life that I hadn't seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And when the owner was on board, I took a 2-week holiday because there weren't enough crew cabins for everyone. So myself and the other delivery crew took a 2-week holiday in Madagascar, and we got given, I think it was 50 euros a day as like survival money, which on this island you live like a king with 50 euros a day.
What'd you do on your holiday?
I met a bunch of friends on the island I was at. They were locals to Madagascar, and they came to Nosy Bay. I think they said they go to Nosy Bay 2 or 3 times a year to party. Basically, I didn't realize it was a party island.
Uh-huh.
So I met with them, and they showed me around, showed me all the good spots to go to. It was overall a really good trip. They do this thing at a few. I guess it's a Madagascar thing, but if like one person starts this chant in the bar, everyone does the same thing.
Yeah.
And I can't repeat it, but it's like this combination of clapping and singing, and it's just so cool to see the entire bar of hundreds of people doing this at the same time. So like everyone's really happy, even though, I mean, majority of them are in extreme poverty. They're just so happy.
Where did they learn this chant, do you think?
I have no idea, but it's really cool to experience.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah.
And so after Madagascar, you were there for 3 months, then what?
And then we sailed back to Thailand, which was another 18 days. This time we had 6 people. We had a chef this time, so we didn't have to cook our own food.
What did the chef cook?
Oh, really good food. Yeah. He was another Italian, but he was very good at cooking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What was your favorite meal?
So on our trip we caught this huge mahi mahi. It was like 45 pounds.
Wow.
And we had half of it as sashimi, and like sashimi, ceviche, a whole bunch of raw mahi. And he put the head and half the body in the oven with some potatoes, which was just so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we caught a lot of fish on the trip.
Yeah, I bet.
Which was good. Yeah. And then we had whatever nice food the boss didn't eat. So we had filet mignons in the freezer and a bunch of other nice treats.
That sounds good.
Yeah. And then when we arrived in Madagascar, the captain asked if I wanted a permanent job. So I said, yeah. And stayed on with them for a year and a half. We did trips in Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia. Indonesia was really cool. We were in Bali for a couple of months, which was a lot of fun.
So for your permanent job, what was the job title for it?
Deckhand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to level up from that?
So after that job, I took a job on a 40-meter performance sailboat, which at the time, I think it sailed across the Atlantic in like 6.5 days or something. It held the record for 14 years before a different boat beat it.
Oh my gosh, 6.5 days.
Yeah, something crazy. I don't remember what the exact thing was, but so I had a job on that, and on that I was bosun. So like in terms of ranking, you have captain, first mate, bosun, deckhand, depending on the size of the boat. Sometimes you might just have a captain, first mate. Sometimes you have captain, first mate, deckhand. So it just depends on the size of the boat. But yeah, I was on that boat for a while, and it turned out the owner had no money, so we all left unpaid on that boat for about 4 months.
For 4 months?
Oh yeah, we got paid once, and yeah, no one else. We didn't get paid for 3 or 4 months.
Did anybody file a lawsuit of any sort?
Well, so the boat was registered in Malta, and you had to go to the Maltese court to do all that. So we just couldn't be bothered. So I got a job. Offered a job on a 37-meter sailboat, which is like 122 feet or something like that.
Okay.
As the first mate in the Mediterranean. So I took that job, and while I was on the plane, I called the manager of the boat that wasn't paying us. I said, I've quit my job and I'm not coming back.
While you're on the plane?
Yeah, because I wanted to like secure it before I told him to go fuck himself, which I did. And so I got offered. I took that first mate's position, which was a good role for me, because I had told the captain that I had been a first mate before, and he said all good. He'd be willing to show me how it's done. So that boat was like primarily charters in the Mediterranean. So we did Monaco, south of France, the big spots like Saint-Tropez. Did a little bit of Spain, Greece. Where else did we go? Italy. We did a lot of Italy. So yeah, that was charters primarily, and the owner used the boat as well. Really another great experience for me.
So for your first mate position, how was it different from the previous ones you've had? Like, what are the new responsibilities for it?
So as first mate, you're in charge of maintaining all the safety equipment on the boat. You're also like a crew manager. So the captain relays information to you, or sometimes you have to just think what the captain would like, or what the owner of the boat would like, and relay that to the crew. And then you're maintaining all the deck equipment, so all the big hydraulic winches that used to lift the sails up, and checking sure all the sails are in good quality. Now, if there's any work you have to do at the top of the mast, you're the one that has to do it. Which is like 160 feet in the air. That's high up. Yeah.
Did you become close? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Did you become close to the captain during that time?
Yeah, so that boat had my favorite captain on it. He was a guy from New Zealand, and he was like the ideal person that I needed to learn from, in my opinion. He was hands-on, so he told me that if you ever become captain, just make sure you're not a fat captain. Which he didn't mean like actually big. He meant like someone who just sits down at his desk and does nothing.
Yeah.
So so he lived by that word. So he was on deck helping me all the time. And on charters, we had rotation. So I would have the late night shift and he would have the early morning shift. So he'd get up in the morning and clean the boat. And then I would be staying up till 3-4 in the morning. We had a 30-foot tender, which is a tender is like a smaller boat that you attach to the bigger boat that you tow around. That I would, take the charter guests to clubs, pick them up at 4 in the morning and bring them back to the boat. Yeah. So if anyone wanted to go on land, I had to take them. It was fun. And then, like after charter guests got off, you'd party with the crew. It was a good time. That was probably one of my more memorable experiences on boats.
How long were you first mate for?
On that boat, I was only first mate for about 5 months, and then the boat was being sold, so it went to the shipyard, where I left and then joined I think after that I took 2 or 3 months off. I lived in Spain, and I was really enjoying Mallorca, which is an island in Spain. So I was renting a room there and had a bunch of friends that I'd hang out with there. But then I took a job in Valencia on a smaller boat as the first mate. and which is also a swan. It was a 100-foot swan. I made a bunch of good friends there, friends that I still talk to this day, but the captain and I just didn't see eye to eye, I suppose.
Yeah.
He was a bit of a drunk, so he'd come home at 2-3 in the morning, make a mess, not get out of bed till 11, and he would get mad at me for not telling him to tidy up his stuff.
Logical.
That was one of the things he said to me. Like, you should be telling me to tidy up my mess. You're a 50-year-old man. I'm 23. Why should I be telling you to tidy up your mess? So that lasted about 3 months, and told him where I think he should go. And then I took a job on a 130-foot sailboat as the first mate, which was in the Caribbean on an island called Antigua. So I flew there. That was the 60-year-old captain that I worked for. And another job where I was given more responsibility, because this was more of a captain who basically just let me run the boat, myself and the engineer, for the most part. So myself and the engineer would, create job lists and to-do lists and worked from there, and just got it approved by the captain. The captain would deal with the financials of the boat and communicating with the owner.
So while you were doing
he'd plan
that
all
job,
the trips as well.
So while you were doing that job, did you have any thoughts or aspirations to become captain?
Yeah, at the time, I was thinking about being captain. I didn't know if I wanted the captain life, I guess you could call it, because it was like throughout working on yachts for 6 years, I had met captains who were, for the most part, most of them were really big drinkers, and they always kind of had a bit of a lonely life, because some of them would either just be single for the rest of their life, and some of them would be married with kids that they couldn't really see for half the year, or wives at home that they couldn't see for half the year, sometimes even more than half the year.
Yeah.
And I had always said that that's not the life that I wanted. But if there was a job available where I could have a home base and not have to sail around the world for half the year, then I would consider it. But it's like those jobs, captains, if they get those jobs, they don't leave those jobs. Yeah. So it's difficult to find jobs like that. Yeah. So
is that what made you quit sailing?
What made me quit sailing was I had an aunt who was very sick, and I wanted to go home to the Caribbean to spend some time with her and help out with my mom, because she has Down syndrome, and she was staying with my mom. My mom was looking after her, so I wanted to fly there and help look after her. And another reason was I had started learning about investing and I guess trading, you could call it. And I made a decent amount of money doing that, and I wanted to see if I could make it work as a source of income. So, I left the job, and I think I was on the boat for over 2 years and a couple months. So I'd saved up a bit of money. And I was in a situation where I didn't have to stress about finances for a while. So yeah, taught myself, and so far it's worked out. And still lots to learn, but so far I'm doing pretty well.
And so for sailing, would you say that you viewed that more as a job and work, or more as a passion?
I would say it was more of a job. The reason I liked it was because it gave me the lifestyle that I wanted. so I didn't have to pay for an apartment. I didn't have to pay for food. We were always in really nice places where I could kite surf, and there was always a group of friends to hang out with. So it gave me a really good lifestyle with a good source of income. But sailing isn't my passion. No.
Mm-hmm. And so since you've been around the world so much and have seen a lot, would you ever want to travel around the world again? Perhaps not in a boat, but some other way?
Yeah, I'd like to maybe visit the places where I was on a boat, and I guess explore them when I'm not working or when I'm not, when I have time to explore them, really. Yeah. So yeah, I want to do traveling for sure. Japan is on my list. New Zealand is on my list. I have friends in New Zealand that I could go stay with if I wanted to. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love traveling.
For clarification, you would never want to sail again for a long time?
I don't see myself working on a boat anytime soon. No.
But what about maybe, I don't know how that works, but maybe renting a sailboat and just
chartering
doing it for
a sailboat?
Yeah.
It's not something that I would get excited about. Yeah. No.
Okay. And I guess to conclude, can you think of any moral lessons that you've learned throughout your time traveling?
Any moral lessons that I've learned?
Yeah, or just one that really sticks out to you.
I would say being humble and being able to accept when you're wrong. Because many situations where you feel like you have a bit of an ego, and if you just take a step back from the situation, you know that maybe what the person you disagree with is suggesting could actually be right. And being humble has allowed me to realize that I don't always know what's best, and there are people who have more experience in what you're doing. Oftentimes, you should listen to what they say.
Mm-hmm. I feel like it's a very good lesson to conclude this episode with. Do you have any final words before we part?
No, not that I can think of.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your journey. To me personally, it was really interesting to hear kind of like a different perspective, or somebody who has seen so much and traveled to so many places. And for anybody listening, I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. And I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.